I was only 7 when the rogue werewolves tore through our home, ripping my parents apart in a frenzy of blood and screams that still echo in my nightmares, leaving me an orphaned Omega scarred by loss and silence. Chapter 1: A Sanctuary of Shadows and Sketches. In the dim, forgotten attic of my uncle's crumbling manor, I carved out my only refuge from the world below, a realm of whispered dreams and charcoal illusions where I could pretend I was more than the worthless shadow he branded me. The air up here was thick with the musty scent of old wood and forgotten relics, a comforting veil that wrapped around me like a tattered cloak. Sunlight, when it dared to filter through the single cracked window, danced with motes of dust, turning the space into a hazy kingdom of my own making. I wasn't just sketching lines on scavenged parchment. I was building worlds. Vast forests where werewolves roamed free, their fur shimmering under moonlit canopies. Alphas fierce yet tender, bound by fates that defied cruelty. In these drawings, an Omega like me wasn't a burden or fragile thing to be hidden away. She was a force, a mate destined for greatness, her spirit howling against the chains of her birthright. My fingers, stained black from the charcoal stubs I'd pilfered from the servants' quarters, moved with a desperate urgency. Each stroke was a rebellion, a silent scream against the life Uncle Bennett had forged for me after that fateful night. My parents, strong betas, pillars of our pack, had perished in what the elders called a rogue incursion, a brutal attack that left our home in ruins, and me clutching a bloody blanket, too shocked to cry. But whispers in the pack hinted at more. Dark secrets, betrayals, a fire that burned too deliberately. I was the sole survivor, a miracle, they said. But to Bennett, I was a debt. He took me in not out of kindness, but obligation. His eyes always cold, his words sharper than claws. "You're weak, Helene," he'd sneer during his rare visits below, his beta aura pressing down like a storm. "An Omega who brings nothing but shame. Your parents died protecting trash." I never spoke back. Words were weapons he twisted, so I learned silence young. It was my armor, thin and cracking, but all I had. Downstairs, the manor buzzed with pack life. Betas training in the courtyards, alphas barking orders, the scent of pine and earth mingling with the metallic tang of dominance. But up here, in my attic exile, I was invisible, forgotten. Meals were cold scraps shoved under the door. My dresses threadbare hand-me-downs that hung like ghosts on my slight frame. The isolation gnawed at me, a constant ache, but it was better than facing Bennett's fists or the pitying stares of the pack. They saw me as broken, an Omega without a wolf's fire, my shifts weak and infrequent, my scent faint, like wilting flowers. Yet in my sketches, I ignited that fire. Today's creation was a majestic Lycan king, his eyes amber flames, standing guard over a hidden glade. He wasn't savage like the tales of our pack's ruler, King Damien, whispers of a beastly alpha who ruled with iron claws and a heart of stone. No, my king was protector, his touch gentle on the Omega he claimed, their bond a thread of silver moonlight weaving through the trees. I poured my hauntings into it, the mystery of my parents' death, the questions that kept me awake. The rogue's attack felt too targeted, too clean. Why had Bennett been absent that night? Why did he hoard their old journals, locked away in his study? The charcoal blurred under my tears sometimes, but drawing was my escape, my prayer for a life where I wasn't defined by loss or status. The groan of the ladder outside my door shattered the peace, a sound that twisted my gut like a vice. Bennett never came himself. He sent servants with reprimands or meager supplies. But today, heavy boots thudded up the rungs, and the hatch swung open with a bang that scattered dust like frightened spirits. He filled the doorway, his broad frame blocking the light, his muddy brown eyes narrowing on my sketch. The air turned sour with his scent, dominance laced with stale ale and contempt. "Still wasting away with your childish scribbles, Meese?" His voice was a gravelly rumble, laced with that false pity he wielded like a whip. He stepped in, his shadow swallowing my world whole, his lip curling as he eyed the parchment. "Your parents were warriors, Helene, betas who fought and died for this pack. And you, hiding in filth, dreaming of fairy tales? What a disgrace." I kept my gaze on my stained hands, heart pounding like a trapped rabbit. Answering only fueled his rage. Silence was my only shield. But he loomed closer, his breath hot on my face. "They sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay them? By being nothing?" The words stung, reopening wounds I'd tried to bury. He sighed dramatically, a sound that promised worse to come. "Well, your game's in today. A summons from the capital. The Pat Court demands your presence." My head jerked up, eyes wide with ice-cold dread. The court, that was for alphas in disputes of power, not omegas like me. This was his scheme. I knew it in my bones. Some new way to break me, to parade my worthlessness before the pack's elite. His smile was a blade, thin and cruel. "Perhaps facing your betters will teach you humility. Clean yourself up. We leave at dawn." He turned, leaving the hatch gaping, the sunlight now harsh and accusing, highlighting the dust and decay. My sanctuary felt violated, the sketches mocking me now. The attic wasn't freedom anymore. It was just another cage, and the door to a larger nightmare was creaking open. As shadows lengthened, I clutched my charcoal, haunted by the ghosts of my parents and the Omega curse that doomed me to invisibility. Little did I know, this summons would drag me into the gaze of a king whose savage heart might just recognize my own. The dawn broke like a wound across the sky, blood red and unforgiving, mirroring the dread that had kept me awake all night, clutching the remnants of my shattered sketches as if they could shield me from the storm Uncle Bennett had unleashed. Chapter 2. The Summoning Storm. I barely had time to scrub the charcoal from my fingers before he burst into the attic again, his face a thundercloud of impatience. "Move, girl," he snarled, grabbing my arm with bruising force and yanking me down the ladder like a rag doll. My bare feet scraped against the rough wood, splinters biting into my skin. But I bit back the yelp. Showing pain only invited more. The manor below with a blur of shadowed halls and averted eyes, servants scattered like leaves in a gale, their pitying glances a silent chorus of helplessness. Bennett didn't speak as he dragged me out into the courtyard, where a rickety carriage waited, pulled by two snorting horses that stomped the frost-crested ground. The air was crisp, laced with the earthy scent of impending rain, and the metallic tang of pack dominance that always clung to him like a second skin. He shoved me inside the carriage, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. I huddled on the worn bench, my threadbare dress offering little warmth against the chill seeping through the cracks. Bennett climbed in opposite me, his bulk making the space feel like a coffin. As the carriage lurched forward, wheels crunching over gravel, he finally broke the silence, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the wood. "You've shamed this family long enough, Helene, hiding away like a coward, rejecting every opportunity I give you. Today the court will see what a disobedient wretch you are." His eyes muddy and merciless bored into mine, daring me to respond. I stared at my lap, fingers twisting in the fabric of my skirt, my heart a frantic drumbeat. Opportunity? His opportunities were chains, forced labor in the kitchens or worse, leering betas he'd paraded before me, sniffing for weakness. The journey to the capital dragged on for hours, the road winding through dense forests where werewolf packs roamed under the canopy, their howl as a distant reminder of the wild freedom I sketched but could never touch. Rain began to patter against the roof, turning the world outside into a smeared gray haze. Bennett leaned forward, his breath sour with last night's ale. You think your silence protects you. It only proves your insolence. I arranged a fine match for you, Helene. A beta from the neighboring pack, Aaron. Respectable, strong. He could have elevated you from your pitiful Omega state, given you a life of comfort instead of this nothing. His words twisted like thorns, weaving a web of lies I knew too well. There had been no suitor, no gracious arrangement. Aaron was a brute Bennett owed a debt to, and the match was a ploy to trade me like livestock. I'd refused, not with words, but by vanishing into the attic shadows, and now he spun it into betrayal. By midday, the spires of the pack court loomed ahead, a monolithic fortress carved from dark stone, its towers piercing the storm clouds like fangs. Gargoyles leered from the battlements, their stone eyes seeming to judge me already. The carriage rattled to a stop in the grand plaza, where alphas and betas milled about, their auras pressing against me like a physical weight. Dominance, curiosity, disdain.
Bennett hauled me out, his grip iron on my wrist, dragging me up the wide marble steps, slick with rain. "Keep your head down and your mouth shut," he hissed, "unless you want to make this worse." The great hall swallowed us whole, a cavernous space designed to dwarf the soul. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows where carved wolves snarled eternally. The air was heavy, scented with beeswax from flickering torches, cold stone, and the underlying musk of shifter power that made my Omega instincts curl inward. Hundreds of eyes turned to us from the tiered benches lining the walls, alphas in fine leathers, betas whispering behind hands, their stares a barrage of judgment. "An Omega?" one murmured, sharp as a blade. "What's she done to warrant this?" Another sneered. "Look at her, frail as a wilted leaf. No wonder she's here." The words sliced deep, but I forced myself to focus on the floor's intricate mosaic, tracing the cracks like lifelines. Then it led me to the center, a circular dais beneath the high throne where King Damien presided, a shadowy figure I didn't dare glance at. Legends painted him as a savage Lycan, his rule forged in blood and unyielding fury, his gaze alone enough to break wills. My uncle released my wrist with a shove that nearly sent me stumbling, then straightened, his voice booming to fill the hall. "Esteemed council, your majesty," he began, his tone dripping with false sorrow, "I bring before you my niece, Helene, an Omega who has brought nothing but disgrace upon our house." He paced dramatically, gesturing at me like I was exhibit in a trial of horrors. "She defies her duties, hides from her responsibilities, and worst of all, she scorned an honorable suitor I arranged, Aaron of the Silver Ridge Pack, a beta of good standing, offering her stability she doesn't deserve, but she manipulated him with her wiles, filled his head with fantasies, then rejected him cruelly, insulting an ally and shaming our bloodline. Lies. Every word a poisoned arrow. There was no manipulation, no scorn, only my quiet refusal to be sold. But the hall murmured in agreement, their contempt shifting from pity to outrage. An Omega who doesn't know her place. Dangerous. I clenched my fists behind my back, nails digging into palms to keep from trembling. Bennett's eyes gleamed with triumph. He wanted this, my complete humiliation, proof of his control. He turned to me, his voice a venomous demand. "Have you nothing to say, girl? Defend yourself, if you dare." I shook my head slightly, eyes fixed on the floor. It was my final act of defiance, refusing to play his game. But it ignited the powder keg. His face twisted into a mask of fury, and before I could flinch, his hand lashed out, grabbing my chin in a vice grip, forcing my head up. "Look at me when I speak to you," he snarled. Then with brutal precision, he struck. A sharp slap that exploded across my cheek in a blaze of white-hot pain. The hall fell into a stunned, ringing silence, broken only by my gasp, the world tilting as humiliation burned deeper than the blow.
The slap echoed through the great hall like a thunderclap, a brutal punctuation to my uncle's fabricated tale of betrayal, leaving my cheek ablaze with humiliation and pain that seared deeper than any wound I'd ever known, marking the moment my fragile world cracked irreparably. Chapter 3. The Slap That Shattered Silence. The silence that followed was absolute, a suffocating void that pressed in from all sides, heavier than the stone walls or the weight of the gargoyle's unblinking stares. My cheek throbbed with a white-hot agony, the imprint of Bennett's hand a burning brand on my skin. I could taste blood where my lip had split, a coppery tang that mingled with the beeswax and shifter musk in the air. My vision blurred, not from tears, I wouldn't give him that, but from the sheer shock, the ringing in my ears drowning out everything else. Bennett's fingers still dug into my chin like iron talons, forcing my gaze to meet his eyes glittering with a triumphant malice that twisted my stomach. He had won this round. He had stripped me bare in front of the entire packed court, reducing me to a trembling omega, a spectacle for their judgment. Around us, the hall held its breath. The murmurs that had slithered like smoke through the tiers of benches ceased, replaced by a collective hush that amplified every ragged gasp I drew. I could feel the eyes, hundreds of them, boring into me, alphas and betas alike shifting uncomfortably, their auras pulsing with a mix of contempt and unease. An omega struck in open court? It was taboo, a breach of the fragile hierarchy that kept our pack from descending into chaos. But Bennett was a lord, a beta with connections, and I was nothing. No one would intervene. This was my fate, to be broken publicly, to prove his narrative of my worthlessness. A profound despair settled in my bones, cold and unyielding. This wasn't just pain, it was the end of any illusion of safety, the confirmation that my parents' death had left me adrift in a sea of cruelty. But then, cutting through the void like a blade through flesh, came a sound that wasn't human. It started low, a vibration that hummed through the floor stones, rising into a deep, resonant growl that prickled the hairs on my neck and arms. It was primal, predatory, a warning from the depths of a beast's soul, promising violence and death. Every head in the hall snapped toward the dais, where the throne loomed like a monolith of shadow and power. King Damien, the savage Lycan, whose name alone evoked tales of bloodshed and unbridled fury, leaned forward from his seat. Until now, he had been a distant myth, a terrifying silhouette I had avoided glancing at, fearing his gaze might shatter me. But in this moment, I couldn't look away. He was immense, carved from the same unforgiving stone as his fortress, with broad shoulders straining against dark leather armor, and hair as black as midnight falling over a brow furrowed in lethal intent. His eyes, amber flames that burned with an otherworldly light, were locked not on Bennett, but on the hand still gripping my chin. The growl emanated from him, rumbling through his chest like distant thunder, sending a shiver through the court. Whispers erupted anew, frantic and fearful. The king, he's shifting? Why her? Bennett's face drained of color,
his grip faltering as if scorched. He released me abruptly, snatching his hand back, his earlier triumph curdling into terror. I staggered slightly, my cheek still pulsing, but a strange warmth flickered in my chest amid the fear, an inexplicable pull, like a thread tugging at my soul. Slowly, deliberately, King Damien rose to his full height, a towering presence that made the air crackle with raw energy. He didn't charge, he didn't need to. Each step down the dais was measured, a predator stalk that commanded obedience. The council members on either side of the throne exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale. Bennett trembled visibly, his beta aura shrinking under the king's dominance. When Damien spoke, his voice was not a shout, but a lethally calm blade, slicing through the tension. "You will never," he intoned, each word laced with death, "touch her again." The court collectively shuddered. It wasn't a threat, it was law, etched in the promise of fangs and claws. He stopped before us, his shadow engulfing Bennett and me like a storm cloud. For the first time, those amber eyes shifted to me, and the world tilted. It wasn't just a look, it was a force, reaching into my core and squeezing the breath from my lungs. A scent washed over me, wild pine after rain, rich earth, and something ancient, untamed. In the chaos of pain and fear, a single word bloomed in my mind: mine. It wasn't my thought, it was deeper, instinctual, like my wolf stirring from a long slumber. Damien's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing his features before his expression hardened into an impassive mask. He turned to the stunned council, his voice absolute. "This trial ends now. The Omega is no longer under Lord Bennett's guardianship." Bennett opened his mouth to protest, but a single glare from the king sealed it shut. Murmurs exploded into an uproar, shocked gasps, frantic whispers. Unprecedented! The king claims an Omega? It defied pack law. He had no right to interfere in family matters. But who would challenge the savage Lycan? His power made him untouchable. Sweeping his gaze over the assembly, Damien's eyes landed back on me, trapping me in their depths. "From this moment," he declared, his tone possessive and final, "she belongs to me." The words hung in the air, rewriting my existence in an instant. Bennett's face twisted with rage, but he was powerless. Guards materialized at the king's gesture, flanking me protectively. As they led me away from the dais, the hall's whispers followed like ghosts. "What is she to him? The beast awakens." My cheek still burned, but the despair had shifted to a whirlwind of confusion and terror. I had escaped one cage, only to be claimed by a monster whose growl had both saved and doomed me. Little did I know, that savage intervention was the spark of a bond that would ignite our fates. The weight of King Damien's declaration, "She belongs to me," hung over the great hall like a storm about to break, shattering the remnants of my uncle's control and thrusting me into a new, terrifying unknown, as if the slap that had marked my cheek was only the prelude to a far greater upheaval. Chapter 4: The King's Fierce Decree. The hall erupted into chaos, a cacophony of shocked gasps and frantic whispers that swirled around me like a tempest. My cheek still throbbed from Bennett's blow, the pain a dull pulse beneath the surreal weight of the king's words. I stood frozen in the center of the dais, a fragile figure dwarfed by the towering stone walls and the predatory gazes of the pack court. Bennett's face was a mottled mask of rage, his fists clenched as if he might strike again, but the king's guards, hulking wolves in black armor, closed ranks around me, their presence an unyielding barrier. Their sense, sharp with iron and loyalty, drowned out Bennett's sour beta musk, and for the first time, a flicker of safety sparked in my chest, fragile and unfamiliar. King Damien didn't linger to savor the uproar. With a single commanding gesture, he turned, his dark leather cloak swirling like a storm cloud, and strode toward the massive oak doors at the hall's rear. "Follow," he said, his voice a low growl that brooked no argument, directed solely at me. My legs moved on instinct, stumbling slightly as I hurried to keep pace, the guards forming a protective cage around me. Bennett lunged forward, his hand reaching for my arm. "She's my blood, my responsibility," he spat, his voice a venomous hiss meant for my ears alone. "You can't just..." Before he could finish, a guard's massive hand clamped onto his shoulder, halting him mid-step. The king didn't even glance back. His authority was absolute, his shadow swallowing Bennett's defiance whole. The door swung open to reveal a rain-soaked courtyard where a carriage waited, a gleaming beast of polished black wood and silver filigree, pulled by 4 midnight stallions that pawed the cobblestones with restless energy. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and ozone, the storm clouds above mirroring the turmoil in my heart. I was helped into the carriage, the plush velvet interior a stark contrast to the cold, damp world outside. It was a prison of luxury, scented with leather and something wilder, pine and earth, the king's own essence. Damien climbed in across from me, his presence filling the space like a physical force, his amber eyes glinting in the dim light filtering through the curtained windows. He said nothing, his gaze fixed on me, unreadable yet piercing, as if he could see the frantic beating of my heart beneath my tattered dress. The carriage lurched forward, wheels rumbling over stone, carrying me away from the only life I'd known, a miserable one, but familiar. My uncle's manor with its attic refuge and constant cruelty was gone, replaced by this new gilded cage. Fear coiled in my gut, mingling with that strange, inexplicable pull I'd felt in the hall, the word mine, echoing in my mind like a forgotten song. Was he my savior or my captor? The stories of Damien painted him as a savage, a Lycan king whose rule was forged in blood, whose beast was barely leashed. Yet he had stopped Bennett's hand, claimed me as his own. The contradiction was a knot I couldn't untangle. After hours of silence, the carriage slowed and I caught my first glimpse of his palace through the rain-streaked window. It was no fairy tale castle, but a fortress, a brutal monolith of jagged black stone clawing at the stormy sky, carved into the side of a mountain as if born from it. Torches flickered along its battlements, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters. The horses snorted as we passed through iron gates, the clang of their closure echoing like a death knell. Inside, the palace was as cold and imposing as its exterior, its cavernous entrance hall lined with banners bearing Damien's sigil, a snarling wolf's head, its eyes seeming to follow me. Servants moved like ghosts, heads bowed, their silence louder than words. Damien led me through echoing corridors, his boots striking the stone with a steady rhythm, my own soft steps barely audible behind him. We climbed a winding staircase, the air growing colder, heavier, until he stopped before a set of carved doors. He pushed them open, revealing a chamber that stole my breath, a roaring fire in a massive stone hearth, a vast bed draped in furs, and a balcony overlooking a sheer drop into the misty abyss below. It was breathtaking, opulent, but it screamed confinement, a cage more beautiful than Bennett's attic, but a cage nonetheless. "You will stay here," Damien said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I thought I saw something softer flicker in their amber depths. Concern, perhaps, or conflict. "You are safe now." I swallowed, finding a sliver of courage amidst the fear.
Safe or a prisoner? My voice was small, but it cut through the silence. He tilted his head, considering, his expression unreadable. Is there a difference? The question wasn't cruel, but it was blunt, heavy with truth. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Do not wander. This place is not what it seems. The doors closed with a soft thud, leaving me alone in the fire-lit room. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the furs and possibly soft, the warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread in my bones. I had escaped Bennett's cruelty, but at what cost? The king's fierce decree had torn me from one master only to bind me to another, a savage Lycan king whose claim felt both salvation and a chain. As the fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls, I wondered if I had truly been freed or merely traded one cage for another, one far more dangerous, where the beast's amber eyes might hold my fate. The night I lost my parents to the rogue wolves massacre left a hollow ache that no amount of charcoal sketches could fill. And now, in the opulent cage of King Damien's palace, that emptiness warred with a new, unsettling pull that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. Chapter 5. Echoes in the Fortress.
The chamber Damien had assigned me was a paradox of beauty and captivity, its grandeur a stark contrast to the attic's dust and decay. The massive bed, piled high with furs as soft as clouds, stood like an island in the room's center, its dark wood frame carved with wolves mid-howl. A roaring fire cast flickering light across stone walls, warming the air with the scent of pine logs and molten wax from dripping candles. The balcony doors, framed in iron, opened to a dizzying view of jagged peaks and moonlit mist, the drop below a reminder of how high, and how trapped, I was. Silk curtains swayed gently, their crimson hue glowing like blood in the firelight, and a polished table held a tray of food, roasted pheasant, fresh bread, and fruit so vibrant they seemed unreal. It was a far cry from the cold scraps shoved under my attic door, yet each bite tasted like ash, a reminder that luxury came with chains. I paced the room, my bare feet sinking into a plush rug woven with silver threads, the fabric alien against my skin accustomed to coarse linen. My new dress, left by silent servants, was a deep green silk that clung to my frame, accentuating curves I'd never dared acknowledge. It felt like a costume, as if I were playing a part in a story I didn't understand. The king's absence was a presence in itself, a weight that lingered in the air like his scent, wild pine, rich earth, and a primal musk that stirred something deep within my omega instincts. I sensed him, not in the room, but nearby, his power a low hum that vibrated through the fortress's stones. Was he watching me? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, fear mingling with a treacherous warmth that bloomed in my chest, unbidden and confusing. Mine, that inner voice whispered again, the same one that had surfaced in the court when his amber eyes locked onto mine. It wasn't just fear tying me to him, it was something older, instinctive, a thread of fate I couldn't name. Sleep eluded me, the bed too vast, too soft, mocking my restless thoughts. I stood at the balcony, the night air sharp with mountain chill, and stared at the endless forest stretching below, its shadows alive with the howls of distant wolves. They were free in a way I never could be, yet even here, in this gilded prison, I felt more alive than I had in years. The memory of Damien's growl, his fierce decree claiming me, replayed endlessly. He had stopped Bennett's hand, torn me from my uncle's grasp, but why? Was I a trophy, a pawn in some royal game? or something else entirely? The contradiction gnawed at me. A savage king, feared by all, yet his intervention had been my salvation. Or had it? The fortress's walls seemed to whisper secrets, their stones cold and unyielding, holding truths I wasn't ready to face. Days bled into one another, marked by the silent delivery of meals and the fleeting shadows of servants who refused to meet my eyes. Their deference was unnerving, their sense muted, as if they feared drawing attention. I explored the room's confines, finding a small shelf of books, ancient tomes on pack lore, their pages brittle and yellowed.
I traced their spines, hoping for answers about my parents' death, about the fire that had stolen them. But the words were dense, inaccessible without context. My sketches, my only solace, were impossible here. No charcoal, no paper, just the sterile perfection of my surroundings. The isolation was different from the attic's, less cruel, but heavier, laced with the constant awareness of Damien's unseen presence. At night, I'd catch a faint echo of his footsteps in the corridor beyond my door, a deliberate patrol that both comforted and terrified me. He was guarding me, but from what? Or for what? One evening, as the fire dwindled to embers, I stood before the mirror, its silver frame reflecting a stranger. My brown eyes seemed darker, flecked with something new, something wild. My omega scent, once faint, felt sharper, as if awakening in response to this place, to him. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heart race, the pull toward Damien growing stronger, more undeniable. It was madness, an omega drawn to a savage king, a beast whose very name inspired dread. But the memory of his eyes, burning with something beyond rage when he claimed me, haunted me. Was it protection, possession, or both? The fortress's silence offered no answers, only echoes of my own fear and yearning. As I sank onto the bed, the furs enveloping me, a distant howl pierced the night, raw and mournful. It resonated with the ache in my soul, the unanswered questions about my parents, my place, and the king who had rewritten my fate. I was safe here, he'd said, but safety felt like a lie when every shadow seemed to watch, every stone seemed to whisper. I clutched the edge of a fir, my fingers trembling, and made a silent vow. I would not remain a prisoner, not to Bennett, not to Damien, not to my own fear. Whatever this pull was, whatever destiny tied me to this savage king, I would uncover it, even if it meant facing the beast within him and within myself. The fortress's echoes were calling, and I was beginning to listen. The shadows of my parents' massacre had always lurked in the corners of my mind, a relentless phantom that whispered of loss and vulnerability. But in the opulent depths of King Damien's palace library, that darkness took on a new, terrifying form when a rival alpha's unwelcome touch awakened a fury I never imagined could be my shield. Chapter 6. The Beast's Protective Fury. The days in the fortress had blurred into a monotonous rhythm of confinement and quiet observation, my opulent chamber a beautiful trap that left me yearning for more than silk sheets and roaring fires. Curiosity, that wild spark I'd long suppressed under Bennett's cruelty, finally won out. Damien had warned me not to wander,
but the pull of the unknown was stronger than his command. Slipping from my rooms one afternoon, I navigated the echoing corridors, my soft slippers silent on the cold stone. The palace was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, its walls seeming to breathe with ancient power. I found the library at the end of a dimly lit hall, a vast chamber that stole my breath, shelves towering like ancient trees, crammed with leather-bound tomes that smelled of dust, ink, and forgotten lore.
Sunlight slanted through high-arched windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced like fireflies. I trailed my fingers along the spines, the titles whispering promises of knowledge. Pack Chronicles, Lunar Prophecies, The Savage Lineage. For the first time since arriving, I felt a glimmer of freedom, losing myself in the pages of a book on werewolf myths, its illustrations reminiscent of my attic sketches, fierce alphas under full moons, omegas with hidden strength. The story stirred that inexplicable pull toward Damien, his amber eyes haunting the edges of my thoughts. Was he truly the savage beast of legends, or something more? The bond I sensed, faint but insistent, tugged at my core, a mix of fear and longing that made my pulse quicken. Lost in the words, I didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. A shadow fell over the page, and I looked up to find a man, tall, sleek, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like chips of ice, blocking the aisle. He was handsome in a predatory way, his alpha aura sharp and invasive, carrying a scent of frost and ambition. I recognized him vaguely from the court, Lord Cassian, a rival alpha from a bordering territory known for his cunning and whispers of disloyalty to Damien. His smile was a blade, too smooth, too knowing. "Well, well," he purred, his voice like oil on water, "the king's little prize, all alone in the shadows. I must say, you don't look like much, fragile, like a wilting flower. What spell did you cast to ensnare the savage one?" I pressed back against the shelves, heart racing, the book clutched like a shield. I don't know what you mean," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He stepped closer, invading my space, his cold scent overwhelming Damien's lingering warmth in the air. "Oh, I think you do," he murmured, his eyes raking over me with blatant hunger. "Damien never acts without purpose. For him to claim a worthless omega like you, to make a spectacle in court, you must be special." His hand reached out, fingers brushing my arm in a touch that sent ice through my veins. I flinched, a gasp escaping, but he didn't stop, his grip tightening slightly, thumb tracing a possessive line. It was inappropriate, violating, a claim he had no right to make. Panic surged, my omega instinct screaming to submit, but a spark of defiance, born from years of Bennett's abuse, flared. "Don't touch me," I said, firmer than I felt, trying to pull away. But he laughed, low and mocking, leaning in until his breath fanned my face. The air shifted then, a crackle of raw power that made my hairs on the neck stand up. A voice, not a man's, but a beast's, cut through the library like thunder. "Do not touch her." It was distorted, guttural, laced with a snarl that echoed off the shelves.
Damien materialized at the aisle's end as if summoned from the shadows themselves. His golden eyes were ablaze, pupils dilated into black voids of fury, veins bulging in his neck, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. The air hummed with his unleashed dominance, a feral energy that made books tremble on their perches.
Before Cassian could react, Damien moved, a blur of black leather and unrestrained rage. He seized the rival alpha by the tunic, lifting him off the ground with effortless strength and slamming him against the bookshelf. Wood splintered with a deafening crack, volumes tumbling in a cascade of dust and pages. Cassian's smug expression shattered into terror as Damien pinned him, one hand raised, claws partially extended, a low, continuous growl rumbling from his chest like an earthquake. It was the beast, the savage Lycan of nightmares, fully surfaced, eyes burning, muscles coiled for the kill. I knew with bone-deep certainty he would tear Cassian apart right there, blood staining the ancient tones. Instinct took over. "Damien!" I cried, my voice small but piercing. He froze, his head snapping toward me, the war in his eyes a storm, the beast's blazing fury clashing with the man's shocked recognition. For a heartbeat, time hung suspended, his ragged breaths the only sound. Then, with a final guttural snarl, he shoved Cassian away. The alpha crumpled, scrambling backward like prey before fleeing the room, his fear a palpable trail. Damien stood there, chest heaving, the violent energy slowly ebbing, leaving a simmering tension. He turned to me, his expression dark, unreadable, but his scent, wild and overwhelming, enveloped me like a claim. He stepped closer, towering, his voice a rough whisper that was both vow and warning. "You see now, little Omega. If anyone touches what's mine, they die." The possessiveness in his words sent a thrill through me, fear twisting with that deepening pull. He had revealed his beast, not in madness, but in protection. As he stalked away, leaving me amid the wreckage, I realized the bond between us was no illusion. It was a fire, and I was drawn inexorably into its flames. The screams of my parents as rogues tore through our home haunted me still, a wound that festered in the silence of my new life. And now, in the shadowed halls of King Damien's palace, those echoes mingled with ghostly whispers that revealed a betrayal far more dangerous than my uncle's cruelty. Chapter 7. Whispers of Betrayal. The library incident with Cassian had left me shaken. Damien's feral protection both a shield and a chain that tightened around my heart. His warning to stay confined echoed in my mind, but the opulent prison of my chamber was suffocating, its silks and furs mocking my restlessness. Curiosity, that defiant spark that had once fueled my attic sketches, burned brighter now, urging me to unravel the secrets of this fortress. Late one evening, when the palace settled into a deep, slumbering hush, I slipped from my room, my bare feet silent on the cold stone floors. The corridors were a maze of torch-lit shadows, the air thick with the scent of ancient stone and the faint musk of shifters who had walked these halls for centuries. Every step felt like a rebellion, a reclaiming of the agency Bennett had stripped me from. The fortress was a masterpiece of brutal elegance, its architecture cold and unyielding, yet alive with an eerie energy. As I wandered deeper, a faint murmur brushed the edge of my hearing, soft as a breeze through cracked stone. I froze, tilting my head. It was a voice, thin and wraith-like, weaving through the air. "The curse will consume him." My breath caught, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. The hallway was empty, the flickering torches casting no figures to claim the words. Was I losing my mind? I pressed on, drawn by an instinct I couldn't name, the whispers growing clearer, more insistent. "Betrayed," one sobbed. "Blood will call," another hissed, sharp with warning. They were fragments of sorrow and prophecy, curling around me like smoke, chilling my skin with a dread that felt older than the palace itself. The voices led me to a set of ornate doors, slightly ajar, their carved wolves seeming to watch my approach. Beyond them lay the council chamber, a vast room lit by a single chandelier that cast jagged shadows across a stone table. I crept closer, heart hammering, and peered through the gap. 3 figures stood within, council alphas, their faces grim, their voices low but laced with venom. I recognized Lord Aaron, a grizzled elder with a scar across his cheek, his aura heavy with authority. Damien's instability worsens, slamming Cassian into a bookshelf for touching that Omega. The beast is overtaking him. Another, a wiry alpha with cold eyes, nodded. This girl, Helene, she's bewitched him, clouding his judgment. He's unfit to lead. The third, younger but no less ruthless, leaned forward. The old laws allow a challenge, a fight to the death for the throne. We must act before he drags the pack into ruin. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. They were plotting against Damien, using me as their excuse, painting me as a weakness to justify their treason. The whispers made sense now, ghosts of the palace, perhaps past victims of such betrayals, warning of the danger. I was no longer just a prisoner. I held a secret that could spark a war. The whispers surged again, a chorus of laments. "Run, little wolf. The stones will drink your blood." Fear rooted me, but I backed away, retreating through the shadowed corridors, their words chasing me like specters. I reached my chamber, heart racing, the weight of what I'd heard crushing. Damien's protection had made me a target, a perceived flaw in his armor. The council saw me not as an Omega to pity, but a tool to wield against their king. The whispers clung to me, their warnings a cold knot in my gut. I sank onto the bed, the furs no comfort now, my mind spiraling. Should I warn him? Would he believe me, or dismiss me as he had in the library's aftermath? The bond I felt, the pull that whispered mine. Was it enough to trust him with this truth? The fortress's stones seemed to pulse with secrets, and I was caught in their web, a fragile Omega holding a truth that could either save or doom us both. As the fire dimmed, casting long shadows, I knew one thing. The palace was a viper's nest, and I was no longer just a guest. I was a spark in a powder keg, and the flames of betrayal were already licking at my heels. The night my parents were torn apart by rogue wolves left a scar that no amount of time could heal, and now in the shadowed opulence of King Damien's palace, that old wound pulsed with fresh pain as his cold words and calculated display drove a wedge between us, masking a truth I was only beginning to glimpse. Chapter 8. A Facade of Indifference.
The library incident had shifted something between us, Damien's feral protection igniting a spark of connection I couldn't shake, yet the days that followed were marked by a chilling distance. My chamber, with its roaring fire and silken furs, felt more like a tomb than ever, the weight of the council's whispered betrayal pressing against my chest. I'd heard their plot, using me as a weapon to dethrone Damien, and the ghostly whispers of the fortress still echoed in my mind. Run, little wolf. But where could I run when every corridor led back to him, to the pull that tethered my Omega soul to his savage heart?
I needed answers to warn him, but Damien had become a specter, his presence felt but rarely seen, his scent lingering like a ghost in the halls. It was at a grand banquet held in the palace's cavernous dining hall that his distance became a blade. The room was a spectacle of power, long tables laden with roasted boar, spiced wine, and gleaming silver, lit by chandeliers that cast a golden glow over the assembled alphas and betas. I was summoned, dressed in a sapphire gown that hugged my frame, its elegance foreign against my skin, still raw from years of threadbare rags. The hall buzzed with shifter energy, the air thick with musk and ambition, and I felt every eye on me as I entered, an omega in a sea of predators. Damien sat at the high table, his throne-like chair a stark reminder of his dominance, his dark leather attire accentuating his broad frame. But his amber eyes, once burning with protectiveness, were cold now, barely glancing my way. Then I saw her, a striking female alpha, her auburn hair cascading in waves, her laugh like a bell as she leaned close to Damien, her hand brushing his arm. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, commanding, her aura a blaze of confidence that filled the room. The court watched, whispering, their gazes flicking between me and her, a silent judgment that I was no match for such a creature. Damien's voice, when he spoke to her, was low, intimate, his lips curling into a rare smile that twisted something deep in my chest. Pain bloomed, sharp and unexpected. The bond I'd sensed, now a raw, aching wound. He was pushing me away, parading this female to prove I was nothing to him. "Stay back, Omega," he said, when I approached the table to serve wine, his tone clipped, dismissive, cutting deeper than Bennett's slap ever had. "You're not needed here." I retreated to the shadows, my hands trembling, the weight of rejection crushing. Yet, as I watched, subtle signs pierced the fog of hurt. His smile never reached his eyes, which flickered to me when he thought I wasn't looking, a storm of conflict in their depths. His hand, resting near the female, clenched briefly, as if to restrain an impulse. When a council alpha, Lord Aaron, the scarred plotter from the chamber, made a snide remark about the king's fleeting fancies, Damien's jaw tightened, a low growl rumbling so faintly only I caught it. The pieces fell together. This was a performance, a calculated act to distance me from the vipers circling him. The council saw me as his weakness. By feigning indifference, he was shielding me from their schemes.
Later, alone in my chamber, I paced, the fire's glow casting restless shadows. The whispers returned, softer now. He guards what he cannot claim. My heart raced, torn between fear and a reckless hope. Damien's coldness wasn't cruelty, it was protection, a facade to keep the council's knives at bay. But it didn't dull the ache of his rejection, the sight of that female at his side. I sank onto the bed, clutching the furs, my Omega instincts warring with the defiance that had kept me alive through Bennett's abuse. I wasn't just a pawn in his game. I felt the bond, the pull that whispered mine, and I refused to let it be buried under his charade. The fortress's secrets were closing in, and I vowed to confront him, to force the truth from the savage king whose heart, I was beginning to suspect, was as entangled as mine. The screams of my parents' deaths at the claws of rogue wolves had carved a void in my soul. And now, in the labyrinthine depths of King Damien's palace, that void drove me to seek answers, uncovering a secret that would draw the savage king's wrath upon me. Chapter 9. Secrets in the Archives. The banquet's sting lingered. Damien's cold facade and the sight of that female alpha at his side, a fresh wound atop old scars. The ghostly whispers of betrayal I'd overheard in the council chamber fueled my resolve. I couldn't remain a passive piece in this deadly game. The library, with its towering shelves and ancient tomes, called to me like a beacon. It held truths about my parents, about the bond I felt with Damien,
about the fortress's eerie voices. Under the cover of night, when the palace slept under a shroud of moonlight, I slipped from my chamber, the sapphire gown replaced by a simple shift that let me move like a shadow. The corridors were a maze of flickering torchlight, the air heavy with the scent of old stone and lingering shifter musk, Damien's wild pine essence faint but ever present. The library's massive doors creaked as I pushed them open, the sound swallowed by the vast chamber within. Moonlight streamed through the arched windows, painting the shelves in silver and shadow. I moved quickly, my heart pounding, drawn to the section on Pack lineages I'd glimpsed before Cassian's intrusion. My fingers traced the spines, seeking anything tied to my family. House Luthane, a name barely whispered since the fire that claimed my parents. I found it, a heavy tome bound in cracked leather, its title faded but legible, Chronicles of the Lunar Clans. Dust puffed into the air as I opened it, the pages brittle under my touch. I scanned the genealogies, my breath hitching as I found my parents' names, Alara and Torin Luthane, listed among beta warriors of a northern pack. But beneath their names, etched in faded ink, was a symbol I'd never seen before. A crescent moon cradling a single star, its lines pulsing with an eerie familiarity, as if my blood recognized it. The symbol appeared again in a footnote, linked to an ancient Lycan bloodline, one predating even Damien's rule. The moon's chosen, it read. Bearers of primal power, bound to the Lycan kings by fate, their blood a key to breaking or binding the curse.
My mind raced. Could this be why Damien claimed me? Was my family tied to his savage lineage, to the curse the council whispered of? The ghostly voices surged, louder now. Blood calls to blood. I clutched the book, trembling, the weight of the discovery a spark in the darkness of my ignorance. My parents' death, the targeted fire. It wasn't random. This symbol, this lineage, was a secret someone had killed to bury. A sudden crash shattered the silence, the book slipping from my hands as a shadow loomed at the aisle's end. Damien. His presence filled the room, his amber eyes blazing with a fury that made the air crackle. His scent, pine, earth, and raw power hit me like a wave, and I stumbled back, heart in my throat. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, claws partially extended, betraying the beast within. He advanced, each step a predator's stalk, his gaze flicking to the open tome on the floor, the crescent and star symbol glaringly visible. His face darkened, a storm of rage, and something deeper, fear perhaps. "You were told not to wander," he snarled, seizing my arm, his grip firm but not bruising. "Do you have any idea what you've touched? I was looking for answers, about my parents, about why you claimed me." His eyes narrowed, searching mine, and for a moment, the rage faltered, replaced with a flicker of conflict. "You're digging into things that could get you killed," he said, his voice quieter but no less intense. "This palace, this blood, it's a fire you can't control." He released me, stepping back, but his gaze held me captive, the bond between us thrumming like a live wire. The whispers echoed, "He knows." I saw it then, the truth he hid behind his fury, the weight of a secret tying my lineage to his own. He turned away, his shoulders rigid, as if fighting the beast's urge to surface. "Stay in your chambers, Helene. No more secrets, not until I decide." He stormed out, leaving me alone with the tome and the ghostly voices, now a chorus of warning. The moon rises. My blood sang with the symbol's truth, a hint of ancient Lycan power I didn't understand, but could no longer ignore. Damien's rage wasn't just control, it was fear of what I'd uncovered and what it meant for us both.
The night my parents died in a blaze of rogue claws left a scar that throbbed with every step I took in King Damien's palace, and now, at a formal dinner, where treachery hung as thick as the scent of roasted venison, that scar burned anew as a rival alpha's claim threatened to unravel the fragile thread binding me to the savage king. Chapter 10. The Public Claiming Challenge. The dining hall was a spectacle of power, its long tables draped in crimson cloth, silver candelabras casting flickering light over platters of steaming meats, spiced fruits, and goblets of dark wine. The air was heavy with the musk of alphas and betas, their auras clashing like storm clouds, and the weight of their gazes pressed against me as I entered, clad in a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight but felt like a target on my skin.
Damien sat at the head of the high table, his presence a dark beacon, his leather-clad frame radiating authority. His amber eyes avoided mine, still cold from our library confrontation. Yet I felt the bond, mine, pulsing beneath his facade of indifference. The council's whispers of betrayal and the crescent and star symbol haunted me, but tonight I was a pawn in a larger game, summoned to this dinner like a lamb to slaughter. Lord Cassian, the silver-haired alpha who'd cornered me in the library, stood as I approached, his icy eyes gleaming with predatory intent. Beside him, to my horror, was Uncle Bennett, his muddy brown gaze dripping with smug satisfaction. The sight of him twisted my gut, his presence a reminder of the addict's cruelty and the lies he'd spun in court. The hall fell into a tense hush as Cassian raised his goblet, his voice smooth but venomous. "Esteemed court, I propose a toast," he declared, his smile ablade. "To Helene Luthane, an omega of surprising allure, whom I claim as my mate, with the blessing of her guardian, Lord Bennett." The words hit like a blow, the hall erupting in gasps and murmurs. Bennett nodded, his grin a grotesque parody of pride. "A fine match, to restore our family's honor." My heart stopped, panic clawing at my throat. Cassian's claim was a power play, a direct challenge to Damien, using me to provoke the king's rumored instability. I looked to Damien, expecting the cold indifference he'd shown at the banquet, but his face was a mask of barely contained rage, his knuckles white around his goblet, the metal creaking under his grip. The air thickened, his scent, wild pine and primal fury, flooding the room, drowning out Cassian's frost. The bond thrummed, a desperate pull that screamed mine, and I knew he felt it too. The hall watched, breathless, as Damien rose, his towering frame casting a shadow that silenced every whisper. "You dare!" His voice was a low, guttural snarl, the beast within him clawing to the surface. His eyes blazed, pupils dilating into black voids, claws extending as he stalked toward Cassian. The rival alpha stood his ground, smirking, but fear flickered in his gaze. "She's unclaimed, my king, an omega, free for any alpha's taking, unless you've grown too weak to enforce your will." The provocation was deliberate, a spark to ignite Damien's curse. Bennett's laughter rang out, cruel and triumphant, but it died as Damien moved, lightning fast, a blur of lethal grace. He seized Cassian by the throat, lifting him with one hand, slamming him onto the table with a crash that shattered plates and sent wine spraying like blood. The hall froze, the air electric with the king's unleashed dominance. "She is mine," he roared, his voice no longer human, a primal bellow that shook the chandeliers. Claws grazed Cassian's neck, drawing thin lines of blood, his smirk gone, replaced by raw terror. "No one claims what belongs to the king." The words were a vow, a possessive oath that sent a shiver through me, fear and longing twisting together. The bond flared, a fire in my chest, confirming what I'd sensed,
I was his, not by force, but by fate.
He dropped Cassian, who crumpled, gasping, as the council stared pale and silent. Damien turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine, the beast still raging but tempered by something softer, desperation perhaps, or recognition. "You," he growled, softer now, stepping closer, his scent enveloping me. "You will not be taken." It was a promise, raw and unyielding, and for the first time I didn't feel like a prisoner, but a partner in this unspoken bond. Bennett's protests were drowned by the guard's swift intervention, dragging him and Cassian from the hall. As the court whispered in awe and fear, I stood rooted, the king's possessive outburst a chain and a shield, binding me to him in a way neither of us could deny. The palace's secrets were closing in, and this public claim had just set them ablaze. The fire that consumed my parents in the rogue attack had always felt like a deliberate inferno, not a random tragedy. And now in the wake of Damien's explosive claim at the dinner, that suspicion ignited anew as an elder's words unveiled a curse and prophecy that bound my blood to his in ways that could either heal or doom us both. Chapter 11. The Curse and the Prophecy. The dining hall's chaos lingered like smoke in my lungs, Damien's possessive roar still echoing in my ears as I was whisked away by guards whose faces were masks of grim obedience. My silver gown, now torn at the hem from the scuffle, felt like a shroud as they led me through the palace's winding corridors, the air thick with the metallic tang of spilled blood and the lingering musk of shifter rage. Cassian's claim, backed by Bennett's treacherous blessing, had been a calculated strike, but Damien's outburst had shattered it, binding me to him in a public declaration that sent ripples through the court. Yet the bond, mine, pulsed with a fierce intensity, leaving me breathless, terrified, and unexplainably drawn. What was I to him? A weakness, as the council whispered, or something more profound? In the hushed aftermath, as I paced my chamber, the door creaked open without a knock. An elder female entered, her presence like a gust of ancient wind. Elizabeth, a council member whose silver hair and lined face spoke of centuries survived. Her eyes, wise and sorrowful, held no contempt, only a quiet pity that unnerved me more than hostility. She was one of the few who hadn't knelt in fear during Damien's rage. Instead, she'd watched with a knowing gaze. "Child," she said, her voice raspy as dry leaves, "we must speak before the vipers strike again." I froze, the ghostly whispers of the fortress seeming to hush in deference to her. She gestured to the bed, and I sat, my hands clasped to hide their tremble. Elizabeth lowered herself beside me, her aura gentle yet weighted with history. "You are no ordinary Omega Helene, and our king, he is no ordinary Alpha." She leaned closer, her breath scented with herbs and age. "Damien's bloodline is cursed, a shadow that has haunted his ancestors for generations." She spoke of the first Lycan king, a warrior who, desperate for power in a war-torn era, forged a pact with a dark spirit of the shadows. The spirit granted unmatched strength, a wolf so dominant it could fell armies, but at a terrible cost. The beast grew wilder with each heir, devouring the man's soul until only savagery remained. "It passes from father to son," she whispered, "and in Damien it is the strongest yet. You've seen glimpses, the library, the dinner. The beast claws for control, and without a tether, it will consume him entirely." My pulse raced, the pieces falling into place. His sudden rages, the court's fear, the council's plots. "But why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a breath. Elizabeth's eyes softened, a flicker of hope amid the sorrow. because of the prophecy, tied to the curse like vines to a tree. She recited it from memory, her words weaving a spell in the firelit room. A king of savage blood shall rise, his reign a tempest of fang and fire. His soul shall be claimed by a daughter of the moon, who shall either tame the beast and usher in the dawn, or shatter his heart and plunge the pack into eternal night. A daughter of the moon. The phrase hit like a revelation, echoing the crescent and star symbol I'd uncovered in the archives, the hint of ancient Lycan blood in my lineage. Your mother, Ilara, Elizabeth continued, her gaze piercing, bore the mark of the moon's chosen, Lycan blood, pure and primal, from the goddess's own line. It runs in you, Helene, hidden by your Omega status, but awakening now. That's why Damien claimed you in court, why the bond pulls at you both. You are the prophecy's key, his salvation or his ruin. My mind reeled, the symbols glow in my memory, now a fire in my veins. My parents' death, the targeted fire, Bennett's absence. It all clicked. They hadn't died in a random attack. They'd been silenced to bury this heritage, to prevent the moon daughter from reaching the cursed king. Elizabeth grasped my hand, her touch cool and urgent. The council knows fragments. They see you as his weakness, a tool to hasten the curse. But if you embrace your blood, you could tame him. She rose, leaving me with a sealed scroll of ancient texts. Choose wisely, child. The dawn or the night, it rests on you. As she departed, the ghostly whispers returned, a chorus of ancestral voices. Daughter of the moon, rise. I clutched the scroll, my heritage no longer a mystery, but a weapon, linking me irrevocably to Damien. The curse explained his distance, his rages. The prophecy explained the bond. But could I tame the beast without shattering us both? The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like omens, and I knew the palace's vipers were coiling tighter. My path was set, not as a victim, but as a force that could redefine our fates. The fire that stole my parents in a night of rogue savagery had always felt like an omen of my own doomed fate, and now, on the day of my forced bonding to Lord Cassian, that omen manifested as a suffocating shroud binding me to a future of chains until King Damien's roar shattered it all. Chapter 12. The Interrupted Bonding. The morning dawned gray and heavy, the palace shrouded in mist that clung to the stone like a veil of despair. My chamber, once a gilded cage, had become a preparation room for my execution, though not of body, but of soul. Silent servants bustled around me, their eyes averted, dressing me in a flowing white gown, the traditional garb for a bonding ceremony. It felt like a burial shroud, cool silk against my skin, embroidered with silver threads that mocked the crescent and star symbol I'd uncovered in the archives. My hands trembled as they pinned my hair with moonstone clips, my reflection in the mirror a stranger, pale, wide-eyed, an Omega resigned to her place. Cassian's claim, sanctioned by Bennett and the scheming council, was a political masterstroke, designed to force Damien's hand, to expose his curse or drive him to abdication. I was the bait, the weakness they exploited, and today I would be bound to a man whose touch chilled me to the bone. Bennett arrived with guards, his face a mask of false benevolence, but his eyes gleamed with victory.
"It's for the best, niece," he said, his voice oily, as he gripped my arm, leading me from the room. "Cassian will give you purpose, far more than that savage beast ever could." The words stung, but I held my silence, the bond with Damien a faint, aching pulse in my chest, whispering, "Mine," even as despair drowned it. The procession to the great hall was a blur of echoing footsteps and the distant murmur of the court. The same hall where Bennett had slapped me, where Damien had first claimed me, was now transformed. Banners of silver and black hung from the rafters, flowers scented the air with false sweetness, and the assembled alphas and betas filled the tiers, their auras a storm of anticipation and malice. Cassian waited at the altar, his silver hair gleaming under the torchlight, his smirk ablade as he extended a hand. Bennett shoved me forward, his grip bruising. "Take your place," he hissed. The High Elder, a stooped figure in robes, began the chant, ancient words of binding that wrapped around my heart like thorns. Cassian's hand clasped mine, cold and possessive, his scent of frost invading my senses. A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. This was it, my life sealed as a pawn, traded from one cruel master to another. I closed my eyes, the bond with Damien flickering like a dying flame, and whispered a silent goodbye to the savage king who had awakened something wild in me. Then came the explosion, a deafening boom that shattered the doors inward, splinters flying like shrapnel as the hall plunged into chaos. Screams erupted, but above them rose a sound not of this world, a roar, primal and earth-shaking, that vibrated through the stones and rattled my bones. Damien stood in the ruined doorway, framed by the stormy sky, not in royal finery, but battle armor, black leather etched with wolf sigils, his hair wild, his amber eyes molten with the beast's fury. His chest heaved, claws extended, the curse's power crackling around him like lightning. The court froze, terror etching their faces as he stalked forward, his gaze locked on Cassian and me.
"You will not have her." His voice was a thunderclap, the beast fully unleashed, echoing with a dominance that dropped lesser wolves to their knees. Guards loyal to the council rushed him, but he swatted them aside like insects, his strength inhuman, a whirlwind of fury that cleared a path straight to the altar. Cassian released my hand, stumbling back, his arrogance crumbling into fear. Bennett snarled, drawing a dagger, but Damien was upon them in a blur. He grabbed Cassian by the throat, hurling him across the hall into a crumpling heap, then turned on Bennett, his claws grazing my uncle's neck. "Traitor," he growled, low and lethal, before shoving him away. The elder's chant faltered, the hall silent but for ragged breaths. Damien faced me, his eyes blazing, the bond surging between us like a visible thread of silver light, coiling from his chest to mine, illuminating the air for all to see. "You are mine," he declared, his voice raw with possession and something deeper, desperation, love. "My mate then, now, and forever." The words ignited the bond, a shimmering aura flaring around us, warm and electric, forging our connection in a tangible glow that made the court gasp. It was no mere claim. It was fate sealed, the prophecy's dawn breaking through the curse's shadow. My tears fell freely now, not of sorrow, but relief, as the pull, mine, became unbreakable. The council stared in horror, their plot unraveling. Damien pulled me to him, his touch gentle amidst the wreckage, his roar fading to a protective rumble. "No one will take you from me," he whispered, his amber eyes softening for a moment, revealing the man beneath the beast. As guards loyal to him surged forward, arresting Cassian and Bennett, the hall erupted in murmurs of awe and fear. I had been bound, not to a rival, but to my true mate, the savage king whose heart beat in sync with mine. The interrupted bonding wasn't an end. It was our beginning,
a visible forge of destiny that would challenge the curse and the traitors alike. The rogue wolf's slaughter of my parents had left a wound that bled through every moment of my life. But in the aftermath of Damien's roaring claim in the Great Hall, that wound began to feel like a call to something greater. A call answered in the intimacy of his private chambers, where vulnerability and passion wove our bond tighter. Chapter 13. Intimacy in the Royal Den. The great hall's chaos faded behind us as Damien led me through the palace, his hand firm around mine, his touch a life mine amidst the storm of stares and whispers. The mate bond, now visible to all, shimmered faintly between us, a silver thread pulsing with warmth that drowned out the council's malice and Cassian's crumpled defeat. His scent, wild pine, rich earth, primal musk, enveloped me, grounding my racing heart as we climbed a spiral staircase to a part of the fortress I'd never seen. The air grew warmer, heavier, scented with leather and firelight, the walls carved with ancient wolf sigils that seemed to hum with power. We stopped before a massive door, its surface etched with a snarling Lycan, and Damien pushed it open, revealing his private chambers, the Royal Den.
The room was a sanctuary of raw elegance. A vast stone hearth roared with flames, casting golden light over furs strewn across a wide bed, its frame hewn from dark oak. Tapestries of moonlit hunts adorned the walls, and a balcony opened to a star-strewn sky, the mountain's breath whispering through. Damien released my hand, his amber eyes searching mine, no longer the beast's blaze, but a man's turmoil, guarded yet raw with need. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low, rough, as if speaking cost him. I stood, still in the torn white gown from the aborted bonding, feeling exposed yet anchored by the bond's pull. "Why me?" I whispered, echoing my question from the library, needing to hear it from him. "Why risk everything for an Omega?" He turned to the fire, his silhouette broad and unyielding, but his shoulders sagged slightly, betraying a weight I hadn't seen before. "Because I've known you were mine since the court," he said, his voice barely above a growl. "The moment I saw you, trembling but defiant under Bennett's hand, the beast knew. It's not just the prophecy, Helene, it's you." He faced me, his eyes softening, and for the first time I saw vulnerability. A king haunted by his curse, by the fear of losing control. "My bloodline is a chain," he confessed, stepping closer, his warmth enveloping me. "It's taken everything, my father, my sanity. I pushed you away to protect you from it, from the council, from myself. But I can't anymore." My breath caught, his words unraveling the walls I'd built around my heart. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, surprising myself with the truth. "I've been afraid my whole life. Bennett, the fire that took my parents, my own weakness. But with you, I feel alive." The bond flared, a rush of heat that drew us closer, our breaths mingling. I reached out, touching his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath leather. "I know about the curse, the moon daughter. I know I'm tied to you, and I'm not running." His eyes darkened, a mix of awe and hunger, and he cupped my face, his touch gentle yet possessive. "You don't know what you're asking," he murmured, but his thumb traced my jaw, igniting sparks. The air crackled as he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, tentative at first, then deepening into a kiss that was all fire and need. I surrendered, my hands tangling in his hair, the bond exploding into a cascade of warmth that melted fear and doubt. He lifted me, carrying me to the bed, the furs soft beneath us as we shed barriers, his armor, my gown, our guarded hearts. In that intimate surrender, we were no king and Omega, but equals, our confessions laid bare.
He spoke of his father's descent into madness, I of the fire that wasn't an accident, both of us haunted by losses that shaped us. Each touch, each whispered word wove our bond tighter, a passionate dance that wasn't just desire, but trust, a vow to face the curse together. As dawn crept through the balcony, painting us in gold, I knew this night had changed everything. Our connection was no longer just fate, but a choice to fight for each other, no matter the cost.
The fortress's whispers fell silent, replaced by the steady rhythm of our hearts, beating as one. The night my parents were engulfed in flames by rogue wolves had taught me that betrayal could come from the shadows closest to home, and now, in the deceptive calm following our passionate union, that lesson resurfaced as traitors wove a web of lies that would test the fragile trust Damien and I had forged, shattering my heart in a moment of his agonizing doubt. Chapter 14. Accusations of Dark Magic. The intimacy of Damien's chambers had wrapped us in a cocoon of vulnerability and desire, our confessions and touches deepening the mate bond into something unbreakable, or so I thought. But the palace was a nest of vipers, and our public claiming had only fueled their venom. Damien was called away the next dawn, urgent whispers of border skirmishes drawing him to a war council in a distant wing. He kissed me fiercely before leaving, his amber eyes soft with promise. "Stay here, Helene," he murmured, his hand lingering on my cheek. "The court is restless. I'll return soon." I nodded, the bond thrumming with his protectiveness, but unease gnawed at me. The ghostly whispers had grown fainter since our union, as if holding their breath for what was to come. I spent the morning alone, sketching for the first time since arriving, charcoal pilfered from a servant's tray, etching wolves under a crescent moon on scraps of parchment. It was a small act of reclaiming myself. The ancient Lycan symbol from my lineage woven into the lines, a reminder of the prophecy Elizabeth had revealed. But the piece was illusory. A sharp knock shattered it, and before I could respond, the doors burst open. Lord Aaron stormed in, flanked by a dozen council guards, their armor clinking like chains. His scarred face was a mask of righteous fury, a scroll clutched in his hand bearing the council seal. "Helene Luthane," he declared, his voice booming with false authority, "you are under arrest for witchcraft and treason against the crown." The words hit like a physical blow, my sketch tumbling from my hands. "What? This is madness!" I backed away, heart pounding, but two guards seized my arms, their grips bruising iron. Aaron unrolled the scroll, his eyes gleaming. "Evidence has come to light, dark rituals bewitching the king into madness, a doll found in your chambers woven with his hair, and witnesses who heard you chanting incantations in the night." My mind reeled. The doll was a crude effigy they'd planted. The chants, my whispered pleas to the ghostly voices for guidance. It was fabricated, a trap sprung in Damien's absence, the council exploiting the curse's symptoms, his rages, his possessiveness, to paint me as the cause. Bennett's hand was in this, I knew, his revenge for the interrupted bonding. They dragged me through the corridors, the palace's stones seeming to wail in protest, the whispers returning in a frantic chorus. "Beware the false moon." Servants averted their eyes, the court murmuring as we passed, their auras thick with superstition and fear. I was thrown into a holding cell in the lower levels, cold iron bars slamming shut, the damp air reeking of mold and despair. Hours blurred in the dim light, my white gown soiled, the bond with Damien a distant ache. He must know by now, must be coming. But doubt crept in. Would he believe their lies? The prophecy warned I could shatter him. What if he saw this as proof? Footsteps echoed, and Damien appeared, his face thunderous, flanked by loyal guards. "Release her," he roared, his voice shaking the bars. Aaron stepped forward, smug. "The old laws demand a trial for witchcraft, Your Majesty. Not even you can defy them." He presented the evidence, the doll, sworn statements from bribed servants. Damien's eyes darkened, his claws extending as the beast stirred, but he hesitated, his gaze flicking to me. In that moment, heartbreak pierced sharper than any blade. Doubt flickered in his amber depths, a shadow of uncertainty. Was it true? Could I have bewitched him? The curse's paranoia, fueled by the prophecy's double edge, made him question our bond, our night of confessions. Tears stung my eyes. His hesitation was a betrayal deeper than Bennett's slap, confirming my worst fear that even he saw me as a potential curse. He turned away, his voice strained. "Investigate further," he ordered Aaron, but the words were hollow. His trust cracked. As they left me in the cell, the whispers mourned. The night falls. The traitors had struck true, not just arresting me, but sowing seeds of doubt in Damien's heart. I curled on the cold floor, the mate bond throbbing with pain, wondering if our connection could survive this test, or if the prophecy's endless night had already begun. The rogue wolves' attack that claimed my parents had been shrouded in lies of a random tragedy, but in the cold depths of the palace dungeon, facing the noose of execution, those lies unraveled in my uncle's venomous taunts, revealing a poisoned dagger that bound my fate to a legacy of witchcraft and betrayal. Chapter 15. Descent into Despair. The dungeon was an abyss of forgotten agony, its walls slick with damp moss and the air thick with the stench of rot and despair. A far cry from the silken furs of Damien's chambers, where our bond had ignited just days before. Iron chains bit into my wrists, anchoring me to the cold stone floor. The white gown from the interrupted bonding, now a filthy rag, stained with grime and my own dried blood from the guard's rough handling. Torchlight flickered through the bars, casting grotesque shadows that danced like mocking specters, amplifying the isolation that clawed at my soul. The accusations of witchcraft had sealed my fate. A swift trial in the council's kangaroo court, fabricated evidence paraded like truth, and a verdict of execution at dawn. The elder's words echoed in my mind, the prophecy's warning that I could shatter Damien's soul. But now, it seemed the night had fallen, and I was the one to be broken. Hours blurred into an eternity of torment, my mind a whirlwind of regrets and unanswered questions. The mate bond with Damien pulsed faintly, a distant ache that offered no comfort, twisted by his moment of doubt in the holding cell. Had he believed the lies? Did he see me now as the witch they claimed, bewitching him into madness? The ghostly whispers of the fortress were silent here, as if even they abandoned me in this pit. I huddled against the wall, shivering in the chill, my thoughts drifting to my parents, the fire that wasn't an accident, the crescent and star symbol hinting at my Lycan heritage. Was this how they felt in their final moments, trapped by betrayal? Tears carved paths down my dirt-streaked cheeks, but I refused to break completely. Defiance, that spark from my attic days, flickered weakly. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy and deliberate, pulling me from my reverie. A key grated in the lock, and the cell door opened with a screech that set my teeth on edge. Bennett stepped in, flanked by two smirking guards, his muddy brown eyes alight with a sadistic glee that twisted my stomach. He was alone with his triumph, Damien still entangled in the web of council meetings, or perhaps wrestling his own demons. "Well, niece," he drawled, his voice a venomous caress, "how the mighty have fallen, from the king's whore to a witch's pyre. Fitting, don't you think?" I glared at him, chains rattling as I shifted, but silence was my only weapon. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound that bounced off the walls. Still playing the mute, it won't save you now. Dawn comes, and with it, your end. He circled me like a predator, his beta aura pressing down, suffocating. You want to know the truth before you burn? Your mother was a witch, too, just like you. The words landed like a slap, stealing my breath. Alara, with her secret chants and moonlit rituals? She bewitched your father, twisted the pack's loyalties. That's why the fire came. Not rogues, but justice. My heart hammered, the pieces shattering into clarity. The targeted attack, the whispers of betrayal. It was all tied to my heritage, the Moon Daughter's blood they feared. Then it leaned in, his breath foul against my face, and from his sleeve he drew a dagger, ornate, its blade black and gleaming with an oily sheen that screamed poison. And this, he hissed, twirling it with mock elegance, is the very blade that ended her. Wolfsbane and shadow essence, a gift from the old king to cleanse the taint. It runs in the blood, Helen, your blood. Horror surged through me, the dagger's edge catching the torchlight, its poison the same that had likely fueled the fire, silencing my parents to bury the Lycan secret. Then its taunt was a knife to my soul, confirming the council's plot, his alliance with Cassian and Aaron, a web to eliminate me and topple Damien. You'll die like her, he sneered, pressing the blade lightly against my throat, a thin line of cold fire blooming, a witch's end for a witch's spawn. The guards chuckled, but I met his gaze, defiance flaring despite the despair. You're the monster, I whispered, my voice breaking the silence for the first time in his presence. He recoiled slightly, surprise flickering, before laughing again. Bold words for a dead girl. He sheathed the dagger and turned, signaling the guards. Enjoy your last night.
The door slammed shut, plunging me back into semi-darkness, the revelation a crushing weight. My mother, accused of witchcraft, killed by the same poisoned blade Bennett wielded, a tool of the old regime to erase our Lycan bloodline. It explained everything, the fire, my Omega hiding, Damien's claim. But facing execution, despair descended like a fog, drowning the bond's faint pulse. Would Damien come, or had his doubt sealed my fate? I curled into myself, chains clinking, the dungeon's chill seeping into my bones. Dawn loomed, and with it, the end. Unless the savage king could defy the curse and save us both. The whispers returned, faint and mournful. Hold on, Moon Daughter. But in the descent into despair, hope felt like a cruel illusion. The rogue wolves' massacre that stole my parents had been a prelude to a life of hidden truths and simmering betrayals, but in the dungeon's suffocating darkness, as Damien's rampage echoed through the stone, I realized that the greatest battle was not against traitors, but the curse threatening to devour the man I was bound to. Chapter 16, The King's Rampage. The dungeon's chill had seeped into my very bones, the chains a constant reminder of my impending doom at dawn. Bennett's taunt about my mother's witchcraft and the poisoned dagger lingered like poison in my veins, twisting despair into a gnat that choked any flicker of hope. The mate bond with Damien pulsed weakly, a distant echo marred by his earlier doubt, a hesitation that had cracked my heart open. I huddled against the slimy wall, the filthy gown clinging to my skin, wondering if he would come or if the council's lies had finally convinced me I was the curse's harbinger. The ghostly whispers were faint here, mere sighs. The beast awakens. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling me toward a fitful doze, when a distant roar shattered the silence, a sound of pure, unbridled fury that vibrated through the stones like an earthquake.
Footsteps thundered down the corridor, not the measured tread of guards, but a storm of one. The iron door to the lower levels ripped from its hinges with the screech of tortured metal, crashing against the wall in a shower of sparks. Shouts erupted, council guards scrambling, their voices laced with terror. "The king, he's—" A sickening crunch cut them off, followed by a gurgle and the thud of a body hitting the floor. Damien was here, alone, no retinue of loyalists, just the savage Lycan unleashing hell. My heart leapt, the bond surging with his rage, pulling me to my feet despite the chains. Crashes echoed closer, bones snapping, armor crumpling, grunts of pain turning to screams. He wasn't fighting, he was annihilating, a one-man apocalypse driven by the mate bond's desperate call. The cell door loomed, and with the bellow that shook the bars, Damien tore it free, the metal twisting like paper in his claws. He stood there, silhouetted by flickering torchlight, his chest heaving, blood, not his, splattered across his leather armor. His amber eyes were wild, blown wide with the beast fury, veins bulging in his neck, his hair disheveled.
"Helene!" he rasped, his voice a guttural mix of man and monster, striding forward to snap my chains with bare hands, the links shattering under his strength. I gasped as freedom rushed in, but his touch was electric, the bond flaring bright, chasing away the dungeon's cold. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against him, his scent, pine, earth, and now the coppery tang of violence overwhelming. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his body trembling. "I never should have doubted. You're mine. I'll burn them all for this." But as he held me, a shudder ran through him, his grip tightening painfully. The violence, the unchecked rage, it had been too much. His eyes flickered, the amber shifting to a blazing crimson, the beast clawing for dominance. A pained groan tore from his lips, and he clutched his head, staggering back. "No, not now," he snarled, his voice distorting, claws extending further as fur rippled across his skin. The curse, fueled by the slaughter he'd wrought to reach me, was triggering, the shadow spirits pact demanding its toll. He dropped to one knee, his body convulsing, bones cracking with sickening pops as the transformation threatened to consume him entirely. Terror gripped me. This was the endless night of the prophecy, the beast swallowing the man, and if he lost control now, he'd become a mindless destroyer, starting with the palace above. "Damien!" I cried, rushing to him despite the danger, my hands framing his face, forcing his wild eyes to meet mine. The bond surged, a silver lifeline between us, my Lycan blood awakening in response to his curse. "Stay with me. Fight it!" His gaze locked on mine, the crimson warring with amber, a storm of agony and recognition. He growled, a feral sound that rattled my teeth, but I didn't flinch. "You're not the beast," I whispered, pouring every ounce of our connection into the words, my thumbs tracing his jaw. "You're my mate, the king who saved me, who claimed me. Come back." Tears streamed down my face, the prophecy's weight crushing. I was the moon daughter, meant to tame or destroy. His body shook, muscles bulging unnaturally, but slowly the crimson receded, his claws retracting as he gasped, pulling back from the brink. He collapsed against me, human once more, his breaths ragged, sweat beading on his brow. "Helene, you anchored me," he murmured, awe threading his voice, his arms wrapping around me in a fierce protective hold. The bond steadied, stronger now, a beacon against the curse's shadow. But the rampage had taken its toll. He was weakened, vulnerable, and the council's forces would be closing in. We had to escape. But in that moment, as I held him, I knew our fight was far from over. The beast lurked, tamed for now, but the traitors above plotted our end. The dungeon's whispers returned, urgent. "Rise together."
The rogue wolves' massacre that stole my parents was a calculated strike to erase my Lycan bloodline. But in the chaos of a courtyard ambush, as Damien lay poisoned and dying, that same blood became our salvation, awakening a power I never knew I held. Chapter 17, Blood of the Ancients.
The dungeon's iron and despair were behind us, but freedom was a fleeting illusion as Damien and I fled through the palace's shadowed corridors, his arm around me, steadying my trembling frame. His rampage had left a trail of broken guards and shattered doors, but the mate bond pulsed strong, a silver thread anchoring us amidst the storm. His scent, wild pine, earth, and blood, mingled with my own, now sharper, as if my Omega nature was shedding its fragility. The fortress's ghostly whispers followed, urgent and insistent. Blood calls to blood. We reached the courtyard, a moonlit expanse of cobblestones ringed by looming statues of snarling wolves, their stone eyes glinting with menace. The night air was crisp, heavy with the scent of impending rain, but before we could cross to the gates, a trap sprang shut. Shadows moved, swift and silent, council assassins, their blades gleaming with an oily sheen that screamed poison. Lord Aaron led them, his scarred face twisted with triumph, Bennett at his side, clutching the same black dagger that had ended my mother. "You thought you could escape, savage," Aaron sneered, his alpha aura clashing with Damien's. The king pushed me behind him, his claws extending, but his movements were sluggish, the dungeon's toll evident. "Stay back, Helen," he growled, his voice strained, the beast stirring but weakened. The assassins lunged, a coordinated strike, and though Damien fought with lethal precision, claws rending flesh, bones snapping under his fists, a blade grazed his arm, the poison seeping fast. He staggered, a hiss of pain escaping, blood dripping black in the moonlight. Aaron laughed, circling like a vulture, wolf's bane and shadow essence, the old king's recipe to end cursed blood. Damien fell to one knee, his amber eyes dimming, the curse battling the poison for control. Panic clawed my chest, the bond flickered, his life force fading. "No!" I screamed, rushing to him, but Bennett grabbed me, the poison dagger pressed to my throat. "You're next, witch," he spat. The ghostly voices surged, a chorus of ancestors, their words clear. "Share the blood, moon daughter." My Lycan heritage, the crescent and star symbol, the prophecy flashed in my mind. Without thinking, I bit my wrist hard, blood welling crimson and hot, my Omega nature sharpening with a primal edge I'd never felt. I pressed my bleeding wrist to Damien's lips, forcing him to drink. "Take it," I whispered, tears streaming. His eyes flared, a spark of amber cutting through the haze, and he drank, his hands gripping my arm with desperate strength. A surge of power erupted within me, my blood awakening, a tingling fire that raced through my veins, silver light pulsing from my skin, illuminating the courtyard. The bond roared to life, stronger than ever, and Damien gasped, his wounds knitting, the poison's black veins receding. He rose, eyes blazing, the beast tempered but empowered, and with a roar, he tore into the assassins. Aaron fell, his throat slashed, and Bennett fled, the dagger clattering to the stones. Damien pulled me close, his breath ragged but alive, the bond a blazing beacon between us. "Your blood," he murmured, awe and fear in his voice. "It's the ancient's power, the moon's gift." The whispers sang triumphant, "Daughter rises." My latent Lycan strength had saved him, but only momentarily. The poison lingered, and the council's forces were regrouping. As we stumbled toward the gates, my newfound power a flickering flame, I knew this was no victory, only a reprieve. The prophecy's dawn was close, but the night still loomed, and our survival hung on the fragile thread of my awakening blood. The night my parents perished in a blaze of rogue claws was a wound that never healed, and now, as my uncle's poisoned dagger pierced my heart, his cruel revelation about Damien's failure to save me as a child sealed my fate, plunging me into death's cold embrace and unleashing the king's cursed beast in a storm of grief and fury. Chapter 18. Death's Cold Embrace. The courtyard ambush had left us battered but alive, my newly awakened Mike and blood a fleeting spark that revived Damien from the poison's grip. We stagger through the palace gates, the mate bond a lifeline pulsing between us, his arms steadying me as we fled toward the forest's edge, seeking refuge from the council's relentless hunters. The air was thick with rain's promise, the moon hidden behind churning clouds, and the ghostly whispers of my ancestors were a desperate chant. Hold fast, moon daughter. But the fortress's shadows clung to us, and before we could reach the trees, a figure emerged from the mist. Bennett, his muddy brown eyes alight with a maniacal triumph, the poisoned dagger gleaming in his hand, its black blade etched with death. "You thought you could escape?" he snarled, his beta aura a sickly weight, laced with the stench of betrayal. Damien pushed me behind him, his claws extending, the beast stirring despite the lingering poison in his veins. "Run, Helene," he growled, his voice strained, amber eyes flickering with fading strength. But I wouldn't leave him. Before Damien could strike, Bennett moved with unnatural speed, a traitor's cunning honed by years of plotting. The dagger flashed, aimed at Damien's heart, but I lunged, shoving him aside. The blade found me instead, sinking deep into my chest with a sickening crunch. Fire and ice exploding through my body, I gasped, stumbling, blood hot and metallic in my throat, as the wolf's bane and shadow essence surged, a poison crafted to kill Lycan blood. Bennett laughed, a cruel, guttural sound. "You're just like her, Helene, your mother, dying for nothing. And him?" He jerked his head toward Damien, who caught me as I fell, his roar of anguish shaking the earth. "He failed you then, too. The old king sent him to guard your family that night, a young prince proving his worth. But he was too late, too weak to stop the fire I helped start. The revelation hit harder than the blade. Damien, tasked with protecting us, had been there, had failed. My parents' deaths, my orphanage, all tied to his guilt." His face twisted in agony, amber eyes flooding with crimson as the curse seized the moment of his despair. I collapsed in his arms, the world dimming, the bond flickering like a candle in a storm. "Helene, no!" he roared, his voice breaking, claws tearing at the ground as he cradled me. The poison burned, my vision blurring, but I reached for his face, my fingers trembling against his jaw. "Not your fault," I whispered, choking on blood, wanting to absolve him before the end. The whisper screamed, "Moon daughter falls." My heart slowed, death's cold embrace pulling me under, and as my eyes closed, Damien's roar became a howl, inhuman, apocalyptic. The curse took hold, his body convulsing, fur ripping through skin, bones snapping as the beast fully emerged, a massive black-furred Lycan with crimson eyes, no trace of the man left. The beast lunged at Bennett, who fled, his screams swallowed by the forest as the creature tore after him, leaving a trail of destruction, trees splintered, earth gouged. I lay still, the bond severed, my body cold, the poison claiming what life remained. The whispers faded, replaced by a void, a silent abyss where even the prophecy's hope seemed lost. Damien's transformation was complete, unleashed by my death, a rampaging force that could destroy the pack or die trying. In that final moment, as darkness swallowed me, I wondered if my blood had saved him only to doom him, the moon daughter's fall, heralding the endless night. The rogue wolves' massacre that stole my parents had plunged me into a life of shadows.
But in the cold void of death, pierced by my uncle's poisoned dagger, their ancestral voices called me back, weaving my Lycan blood into a rebirth that awakened a silver-eyed power I never knew I possessed. Chapter 19. Rebirth Under the Moon. The darkness was absolute, a weightless abyss where time and pain dissolved, leaving only silence, a silence louder than any scream. The poisoned dagger's sting lingered in my chest, a fading echo of Bennett's betrayal and Damien's anguished howl as he transformed into the beast. My body was gone, my heart stilled, the mate bond with Damien a severed thread, its absence a deeper wound than the blade. I was adrift, a ghost in death's embrace, the prophecy's warning of an endless night seeming fulfilled. But then a whisper broke the void, soft yet resonant, like a breeze through ancient trees. "Moon daughter, rise." It was my mother's voice, joined by others, my father, ancestors, a chorus of Lycan blood stretching back through centuries, their presence a silver glow piercing the dark. "Your blood is not ended," they sang, their voices weaving a tapestry of power and memory. "The moon's chosen do not fade." Images flooded my mind, my mother chanting under starlight, her eyes gleaming silver, my father wielding primal strength to protect our pack, the crescent and star symbol pulsing in my veins. The poison had targeted my Lycan heritage, but it hadn't destroyed it. It had awakened it. A surge of heat sparked in the void, a fire kindling where my heart should be, pulling me back. "Share the blood, claim the dawn," the voices urged, and I felt it, a rush of primal energy, my Lycan blood igniting, burning away the wolf's bane and shadow essence. My wounds knit, my breath returned, and the bond with Damien flickered back to life, faint but growing, a silver thread reaching for his raging beast.
I gasped, eyes snapping open to the moonlit forest clearing where I'd fallen. The night air was sharp, scented with pine and blood, the ground torn by Damien's rampage. My chest ached, the dagger wound now a silver scar, glowing faintly under the full moon's gaze. I sat up, trembling, my vision sharper, my senses alive with a power that thrummed in my veins. My eyes, once brown, now gleamed silver in the moonlight, a mirror of my mother's, the mark of the moon daughter fully awakened. The ancestral voices hummed, triumphant. "You are reborn." My Omega weakness was gone, replaced with a strength that felt ancient, unyielding, tied to the prophecy's promise to tame or destroy. I stood, the tattered gown hanging in rags, but I felt no cold, only purpose. The bond pulsed stronger, guiding me through the forest, where trees lay splintered and earth was gouged by Damien's beastly rampage. His howls echoed, a mournful cry of grief and fury, and I knew he was lost to the curse, hunting Bennett and any who crossed his path. The voices urged, "Find him, anchor him." My silver eyes cut through the dark, my steps sure, driven by the mate bond and my newfound power. I was no longer the fragile Omega. I was Helene, moon daughter, my blood a beacon to call him back. I found him in a ravaged glade, a massive black-furred Lycan, crimson eyes blazing, claws dripping with blood. Bennett's I sensed, his scent faint and fading. The beast roared, lunging toward me, but I stood my ground, the bond flaring like a supernova. "Damien!" I called, my voice resonant with Lycan power, silver light radiating from me, enveloping him. His charge faltered, crimson eyes flickering with amber, recognition breaking through. The voices sang, "Tame the beast." I reached out fearless, my hand touching his furred muzzle, the bond weaving us together, pulling him back from the curse's edge. His form shuddered, shrinking, until he knelt before me,
human again, sweat-soaked and trembling, his amber eyes wide with awe. "Helene, you're alive," he whispered, pulling me into his arms, the bond blazing bright. My rebirth had defied death, my silver-eyed power a testament to the ancients' legacy. But the council's threat loomed, and the poison scar reminded me our fight was far from over. Under the moon's watchful gaze, I knew I was no longer just Damien's mate. I was his equal, a moon daughter ready to face the dawn or the night. The ancestral voices fell silent, their work done, leaving only our shared heartbeat echoing in the night. The rogue wolves massacre that claimed my parents had forged a resilience in me I scarcely recognized. But as I tracked Damien's rampaging beast to the Great Hall, my reborn Lycan blood and our mate bond became the only weapons capable of taming the monster threatening to consume him. Chapter 20. Calming the Monster. The forest clearing where I'd been reborn under the moon's silver gaze still thrummed with the power of my awakening, my silver eyes cutting through the darkness as I followed the bond's pull toward Damien. His beastly howls, raw with grief and fury, echoed through the night, each one a stab to my heart.
My chest bore the silver scar of Bennett's poisoned dagger, a mark of my Lycan heritage now fully alive, pulsing with the prophecies promised to tame or destroy. The ancestral voices were silent now, their guidance fulfilled, leaving only the mate bond, a blazing silver thread, guiding me back to the palace. The fortress loomed ahead, its black stone towers clawing at the stormy sky, the great hall's glow spilling through shattered windows, a beacon of chaos where Damien's rampage had drawn him. I sprinted through the gates, my torn gown trailing like a ghost, my senses sharpened by Lycan power. The courtyard was a graveyard of splintered statues and bloodied guards, victims of the beast's wrath. The great hall's massive doors hung off their hinges, the air inside thick with the scent of iron, wax, and primal musk, Damien's scent, now twisted by the curse's savagery. Inside, the hall was a battlefield. Chandeliers swayed, tables overturned, tapestries shredded. The beast stood at the center, a towering black-furred Lycan, crimson eyes blazing, claws rending stone as he roared, his massive form dwarfing the cowering council members and servants huddled in the shadows. Lord Aaron's body lay crumpled near the dais, proof of Damien's lethal path. But the beast showed no sign of stopping, the curse driving him toward annihilation. The bond surged, a lifeline of silver light only I could see, connecting my heart to his. "Damien!" I called, my voice resonant with Lycan power, cutting through his roar. His head snapped toward me, crimson eyes narrowing, no recognition in their depths, only feral hunger. Fear gripped me, but I stepped forward, my silver eyes meeting his, the prophecy's weight heavy on my shoulders. The council gasped, their whispers of witch and moon daughter a dull hum against the bond's song. I raised my hands, palms open, unafraid, and moved closer, the air crackling with his dominance. "It's me, Helene," I said, softer now, pouring love and trust into each word. "Your mate, come back to me." He lunged, claws grazing the air, but I didn't flinch, trusting the bond. My hands found his furred muzzle, warm and rough, and the silver light of my Lycan blood flared, enveloping us in a radiant glow. The bond pulsed, a tidal wave of memories, our night in his chambers, his confession of guilt, my rebirth, flooding through us. His roar softened to a growl, then a whimper, his massive form trembling. "You're not the monster," I whispered, my fingers tracing his jaw, tears streaming down my face. His crimson eyes flickered, amber breaking through like dawn through storm clouds, and his body shuddered, bones cracking as the beast retreated. He collapsed, human again, kneeling before me, sweat-soaked and gasping, his amber eyes wide with awe and relief. "Helene, you pulled me back," he rasped, his hands gripping mine, the bond steady and unbreakable. The hall fell silent, the council's fear palpable. They'd seen the prophecy fulfilled, the moon daughter, taming the beast. I helped him stand, his strength returning, our connection a shield against the traitor's lingering threat. The curse wasn't gone, but for now it was subdued. My touch and blood, the anchor he needed.
As we faced the trembling court, hand in hand, I knew the battle wasn't over. The council's schemes and the curse's shadow loomed, but in that moment we were one. The savage king and his moon daughter, ready to face whatever came next. The rogue wolves' massacre that stole my parents had been a spark for a lifetime of betrayal, but now, united with Damien and armed with my awakened Lycan blood, the ghostly whispers of the palace fueled a vengeful resolve as we marched to confront the traitors in the Pack Court. Chapter 21. March to Confrontation. The great hall still reeked of chaos, shattered stone, spilled blood, and the fading echo of Damien's beastly roars when we emerged from the wreckage of his transformation. My silver eyes glowed softly in the torchlight, a testament to my rebirth as the moon daughter, the mate bond pulsing like a beacon between us. Damien stood tall, his human form restored, but his amber eyes still fierce, the curse subdued, but ever present. The council members who hadn't fled cowered in the shadows, their whispers of witch and beast silenced by the undeniable power of our union. But we knew the true threat lingered. Lord Aaron was dead, Bennett had fled, but the surviving council alphas, loyal to their schemes, were regrouping in the Pack Court, plotting to seize the throne under the guise of Damien's instability. We had no time to rest. Damien's loyal guards, a small but fierce contingent clad in black armor etched with wolf sigils, rallied to us in the hall. Their sense, iron, loyalty, and earth grounded me as I donned a leather tunic and boots provided by a trembling servant, the garb practical yet regal, fitting my new strength. Damien strapped on his battle armor, the dark leather gleaming, his movements precise despite the poison's lingering toll. He growled, "They think they can break us," his voice a low rumble as he buckled a sword to his belt. "They'll learn what happens when you challenge a king and his mate." His eyes met mine, amber burning with pride and love, the bond flaring with our shared resolve. I nodded, my silver scar tingling, the crescent and star symbol alive in my blood. "I end this," I said, my voice steady, no longer the Omega's whisper, but the Moon Daughter's command. The ghostly whispers surged, no longer warnings, but a battle cry. Blood calls for justice. We marched through the palace, our guards forming a tight phalanx, their boots echoing like war drums on the stone. The corridors, once suffocating, now felt like a path to destiny, the sigils on the walls glowing faintly, as if acknowledging my Lycan heritage. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and steel, a storm brewing within and without. We reached the grand doors of the Pack Court, the same hall where Bennett had struck me, where Damien had first claimed me. Now it was a battlefield, the council's surviving alphas, led by the wiry, cold-eyed Varen, gathered on the dais, their auras thick with defiance and treachery.
The doors burst open under Damien's kick, revealing a court packed with betas and lesser alphas, their murmurs halting as we entered. Varen stood at the throne, a stolen scepter in hand, his voice dripping venom. "The cursed king and his witch, you've brought ruin to this pack. Step down, or we'll tear you apart." The council's guards bristled, their weapons drawn, but our loyalists matched them, steel glinting in the torchlight. I stepped forward, my silver eyes blazing, the bond with Damien a roaring fire. "I am the Moon Daughter, and we will not bow." Damien's growl echoed mine, his presence a storm of dominance that made the court tremble. "You wanted the beast?" he roared, claws extending just enough to promise violence. "You'll face us both." The whispers sang, "Justice rises." The council's bravado faltered, their eyes darting to my glowing scar, to Damien's barely restrained fury. We were no longer prey, but predators, united in vengeance. As our guards advanced, the traitor's resolve cracked, the hall poised on the edge of bloodshed. The prophecy's dawn was within reach, but only if we could crush the schemers before they struck again. Our march to confrontation had begun, and the castle's whispers fueled our fire, urging us towards a reckoning that would redefine the pack forever. The rogue wolves massacre that claimed my parents had been a spark that ignited a lifetime of betrayal. But as Damien and I stormed the Pack Court's judgment hall, my awakened Lycan blood and our unbreakable mate bond fueled a battle that would end my uncle's treachery and reshape our destiny. Chapter 22. Battle in the Judgment Hall. The Pack Court's grand doors loomed before us, a threshold to justice or ruin, the air electric with the scent of steel, ozone, and the Pack Court's festering ambition. Damien's amber eyes burned with controlled fury, his black armor gleaming under torchlight, the curse's shadow held at bay by our bond's silver thread. My leather tunic felt like a second skin, my silver scar pulsing with the crescent and star symbol's power, my eyes glowing with the Moon Daughter's strength. Our loyal guards, a tight knot of black-clad wolves, flanked us, their loyalty a steady anchor against the traitor's schemes. The ghostly whispers of the fortress surged, a battle hymn. Justice cuts deep. We didn't hesitate. Damien kicked the doors inward with a thunderous crash, and we charged into the judgment hall.
The hall was a crucible of chaos, its vaulted ceilings and wolf-carved walls mocking the council's stolen authority. Lord Varen stood on the dais, clutching a scepter, his wiry frame radiating defiance, while a dozen traitor guards formed a wall of steel, their blades drawn. The court, betas, lesser alphas, and onlookers gasped, their auras a mix of fear and anticipation. Damien moved first, a whirlwind of controlled savagery, his claws and sword a blur as he tore into the guards. He didn't unleash the beast fully. His strikes were precise, lethal, armor rent, blood sprayed, bodies crumbling before they could raise a blade. His dominance filled the hall, a primal roar shaking the chandeliers, forcing lesser wolves to their knees. "Traitors!" he bellowed, his voice a blade. "You dare challenge your king?" I scanned the chaos, my silver eyes locking on a figure skulking near the dais. Bennett, his muddy brown gaze wide with panic, the poison dagger glinting in his hand. The man who'd tormented me, who'd orchestrated my parents' murder, who'd wielded lies to chain me. Rage surged, my Lycan blood igniting, the whispers chanting, "End him!" I moved, swift and sure, my newfound strength guiding me through the fray.
A guard lunged, but I dodged, my instinct sharp, and drove my fist into his throat, a strike fueled by years of suppressed defiance. He fell, gasping, and I reached Bennett, his smirk faltering as he saw my glowing eyes. "Helen," he sneered, raising the dagger, its black blade reeking of wolf's bane. "You think you're more than a weak Omega? You'll die like your witch mother." His words, meant to wound, only fueled my fire. I didn't speak. I acted. As he thrust the dagger, I sidestepped, my Lycan speed a blur, and seized his wrist, twisting until the blade clattered to the stone. My other hand struck, a swift, empowering blow to his chest, my silver scar flaring as I channeled the Moon Daughter's power. Bennett staggered, blood trickling from his mouth. His beta aura collapsed under my strength. "For my parents," I hissed, delivering a final strike, a palm to his temple that sent him crashing to the floor, unconscious, defeated. The hall fell silent, the remaining traitor guards faltering as Damien dispatched the last of their ranks, his sword dripping red. He turned, his amber eyes meeting mine, pride and awe shining through the battle's haze. The bond flared, a silver beacon visible to all, cementing our unity. Varen dropped the scepter, his defiance crumbling, but Damien wasn't done. He stalked to the dais, seizing the traitor Alpha by the throat, his voice a low growl. "Your schemes end here." The court watched, breathless, as our loyal guards rounded up the survivors, the whispers triumphant, "The dawn breaks."
My victory over Bennett was more than physical. It was a reclaiming of my soul, a defiance of the Omega label that had caged me. Standing beside Damien, our bond a radiant shield, I knew the battle had shifted the pack's heart. The Judgment Hall, once a place of my humiliation, was now our triumph. But the curse still lingered in Damien's blood, and traitors' whispers could rise again. For now, though, we stood unbroken, the king and his moon daughter, ready for the final reckoning. The rogue wolves' massacre that stole my parents had branded me as a worthless Omega, but in the aftermath of our battle in the Judgment Hall, as the surviving Alphas knelt in surrender, Damien's own kneel before me declared my undeniable worth, forging an equal partnership that reshaped the pack's future. Chapter 23, Submission of the Pack. The Judgment Hall was a graveyard of shattered ambitions, its air thick with the acrid scent of blood, steel, and fear. The council's treachery lay in ruins. Lord Varen slumped against the dais, his defiance broken, and Bennett sprawled unconscious, the poisoned dagger useless beside him. Damien stood at my side, his black armor stained with the battle's toll, his amber eyes blazing with a controlled fury that held the curse at bay. My silver scar glowed faintly, the crescent and star symbol alive in my blood. My silver eyes reflected the torchlight as proof of my rebirth as the Moon Daughter. Our mate bond pulsed, a silver thread visible to the court, binding us as one. The ghostly whispers of the fortress, once warnings, now sang a hymn of triumph. The dawn is yours. The surviving council Alphas, their ranks decimated, stood trembling before us, their auras cowed by Damien's dominance and my newfound power. Our loyal guards, black-clad and unwavering, formed a ring around the dais, their swords drawn to enforce the reckoning. The pack, once fractured by betrayal, was bending to our will. I expected Damien to address them, to cement his rule with a king's command, but instead he turned to me. In a moment that stole my breath, he lowered himself to one knee, his sword clattering to the stone, his head bowed not in defeat but in devotion. Bahal gasped, the act unprecedented, a savage Lycan king kneeling to an Omega, a moon daughter who had once been nothing. His amber eyes lifted to mine, soft with love and fierce with pride. "Helene," he said, his voice steady, carrying to every corner, "you are my mate, my equal,
the dawn that tamed my night. Without you, I am only the beast. With you, I am whole. The bond flared, a radiant glow enveloping us, and tears pricked my eyes, not of sorrow, but of a profound belonging I'd never known.
The court watched, spellbound, as I reached for his hand, pulling him to his feet. "We rule together," I said, my voice clear, the Moon Daughter's strength banishing the Omega silence, not as king and subject, but as partners. The whispers rejoiced. The pack is reborn. The kneeling alphas bowed lower, their surrender complete, not just to Damien's power, but to our unity. Even Varen's cold eyes softened, recognizing the shift. A pack no longer ruled by fear, but by a bond that defied curse and betrayal. We stood on the dais hand in hand, the bond a beacon that silenced whispers of dissent. The council's schemes had crumbled, their lies of witchcraft exposed. Bennett's treachery ended by my hand. The pack saw me now, not as a fragile Omega, but as a force, my Lycan blood and silver eyes proof of my worth. Damien's kneel was more than devotion. It was a declaration to the pack that I was no pawn, but a queen in my own right. As the torches flickered, casting our shadows across the hall, I felt the weight of my parents' legacy lift, replaced by a future we would forge together. The battle was won, but the curse lingered, a shadow we would face as one, our partnership alight against the coming night. The rogue wolves massacre that stole my parents had set me on a path of pain and secrets, but in the radiant light of our coronation, as Damien and I stood united, our bond of gold and silver crowned us as equals, heralding a peaceful future forged by love and unyielding strength. Chapter 24. Crowns of Sun and Moon. The Judgment Hall, once a crucible of betrayal and bloodshed, was transformed into a cathedral of hope, its stone walls draped with banners of silver and gold, reflecting the mate bond that had defied a curse and toppled traitors. The air shimmered with the scent of fresh pine and blooming jasmine, a stark contrast to the iron and fear of battles past. The pack filled the hall, their faces no longer shadowed by doubt, but alight with reverence. Alphas, betas, and omegas united under a new dawn. My silver scar glowed faintly, the crescent and star symbol, a badge of my Lycan heritage. My silver eyes meeting Damien's amber ones, the bond pulsing like a heartbeat between us. We stood on the dais, no longer king and outcast, but partners, ready to claim our roles as rulers of a healed pack. The High Elder, Elizabeth, stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming, her eyes warm with pride. She held 2 crowns, one of gold etched with solar flames for Damien, the son of our pack's strength, the other of silver, adorned with lunar crescents for me, the Moon Daughter who tamed the beast. "By the grace of the ancients," she intoned, her voice carrying the weight of prophecy fulfilled, "we crown Damien, king of the Lycans, and Helene, queen of the moon, as equals to lead our pack into peace." The crowd roared, a wave of howls and cheers that shook the chandeliers, the ghostly whispers of my ancestors joining in a final triumphant chorus. The dawn is won. Elizabeth placed the crowns upon us, the weight rounding, the bond flaring as gold and silver light wove around us, a visible testament to our unity. Damien took my hand, his touch warm, his gaze fierce with love. "Together," he said, his voice a vow that silenced the hall, "we heal the wounds of the past, mine, yours, the pack's. No more curses, no more betrayal." I nodded, my heart swelling, no longer the silent Omega, but a queen whose strength had shattered chains. "With love and power," I added, my voice clear, "we build a future where every wolf stands tall." The pack knelt, not in fear, but in loyalty, their auras a tapestry of hope. Even the surviving council members, stripped of power, bowed, their schemes buried beneath our victory. As we descended the dais, hand in hand, the pack surged forward, offering gifts, woven blankets, carved totems, symbols of a renewed bond with their rulers. The hall erupted in celebration, music and laughter replacing the echoes of battle. Damien pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead, the bond a radiant shield against any lingering shadows. The curse still lurked in his blood, but with my Lycan power and our love, it was a foe we would face together. The future stretched before us, peaceful yet fierce, a pack reborn under crowns of sun and moon. What legacy would you forge if you could rewrite your own destiny? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's spark a conversation about courage and transformation. If this tale of Helene and Damien moved you, like, share, and subscribe to the author's journey in weaving stories of strength and love. Your voice matters. Join the pack.